Part 5, Risk Key Management Concept. Key Risk Management Concepts. Number 1, Risk and Uncertainty. Uncertainty is something that is unquantifiable due to unpredictability of future events, whereas risk is something that can be estimated with certain degree of confidence using statistical method. It is not possible to calculate risk with 100% accuracy. There are always certain degree of uncertainty present in the risk, which depends upon following: chosen risk model and underlying assumptions, availability and quality of data, chosen model parameters such as time horizon or frequency of data input, chosen confidence level, amongst other factors. Risk event is an outcome that arises from a single decision or an action that could result in more than one outcome. Technically, every outcome is a risk event. It is also an event which results in outcomes that are significantly more positive or negative than expected. Probability into impact is equal to exposure. Formula for risk. Pure and speculative risk. These are the risks which have only neutral and negative outcomes, such as fire or risk of physical damage, injury, or risk of illness, is called as pure risk. Whereas speculative risks are those that have three outcomes: positive, negative, or neutral. Inherent and residual risks. Inherent risks are those risks or exposures which are present even in the absence of control or risk mitigation actions. Residual risks are those risks or the exposures which remains after the implementation or application of risk control and risk mitigation actions. Principal and emerging risks. Principal risks are also known as significant or key risks that is considered material and can affect the viability of the organization. In finance, it is also known as risk of losing entire investment. Example is talent or data security. Emergent risk. These are the risks also known as disruptive risk. These risks are not yet affect the organization, but may develop to become a principal risk in future, like changes in consumer taste and preferences, use of data automation techniques, etc. Board should make sure these risks are properly assessed and responded. Risk profile is the combination of all principal and emergent risks. Principal risks are reported as a part of a strategic annual report. Now, the black swan, or you can say trails. These are the risks arising from highly improbable and difficult to predict event, or event that has a small probability of occurrence but has widespread ramification, like 9/11, COVID-19. Wrong way risk. These risks occurs when risk exposure to counterparty is adversely correlated. For example, if a risk adversely affect the B. Risk taxonomy is set of all the risk categories used in the organization. So basically, it's a combination of risk categories. Now, categories of risk. Commonly, organization group their risk categories. It helps us to establish a common risk taxonomy within the organization, which improve quality of communication and increase the effectiveness of decision making. Commonly, risks are grouped into following categories: business risks. These are the type of non-financial risk related to positive and negative outcome that are inherent in the organization's operating environment. Inherent in the organization operating environment, such as action of competitors, changes in economical and political conditions. This risk is willingly assumed by the organization to gain competitive advantage and can be grouped as an internal or external. These risks are intangible and need to be identified. An organization will usually try to reduce high impact, high probable business risk to acceptable level either by internal changes or by insurance or combination of both. Risks that cannot be reduced or eliminated are monitored properly or effectively. Credit risk is the risk that a borrower or a counterparty will suffer a deterioration in its credit rating or an outright default that will lead that borrower and or counterparty to unable to meet its outstanding obligations. Credit risk exposure is measured as the amount of loss that would be realized if counterparty or borrower actually defaults. Concentration risk is a risk of a single exposure or a group of single exposures that has potential to result in losses and can threaten the ability of an organization to maintain its core business activity. Settlement risk is concerned with the risk of trading transactions not settling as per pre-agreed terms and conditions. Example, counterparty fails to deliver security against payment. Credit risk is measured through combination of following methods depending upon exposures. Statistical methods, models, stress testing and scenario analysis, risk appetite and limits, credit underwriting and diversification standards, qualitative assessments. Market risk measures the extent of change in that value of investment due to change in the factors that affect the overall performance of the financial market, also known as systematic risk. Here, risks are inherent to the entire market, not particular investment. There are four major categories of this risk. Equity risk, interest rate risk, foreign exchange risk, commodity price risk, liquidity risk. Is another example of financial risk where example is asset liquidity. And this is an asset's degree of illiquidity or inability to easily sell these assets and funding liquidity is the risk that organization is unable to meet its payment obligation in timely manner in normal or stress market conditions. Operational risk is a risk resulting from inadequate and failed internal processes, people and system. From external events, these risks are generally pure risks that can only result in losses. These are linked to usual operations and to factors such as organizational culture, internal control environment, contingency planning, crisis management. This risk includes legal. Is the risk that organization will not be able to fulfill its obligation. Legal is the risk that organization will not be able to fulfill its obligation required by the law, which leads to regulatory fines or loss due to legal action by other party. Regulatory risk is when organization may be in violation of applicable laws and regulations. Data quality risk is that data used to calculate internal or regulatory exposure is incomplete or inaccurate. Then reputation risk is a type of strategic risk. It refers to risk of loss resulting from loss/damage of reputation, brand value, and goodwill. It is associated with large-scale operational incident. Risks are further categorized as preventable risk, known as internal risks faced by organizations that are controllable. Organizations should eliminate or avoid such risks. Organization can have tolerance level for the risk which cannot be managed at 100% elimination rate as cost outweigh the benefits. These risks can be managed through active prevention by monitoring risky activities and guiding human behavior. Strategy risk. These risks are assumed slash taken by organization willingly in order to gain competitive advantage to achieve their objective. Example is credit risk, research and development risk, risk associated with merging two organizations and undertaking major changes. These risks are best managed through framework that is designed to minimize the materialization of risk and enhance overall ability of the organization to contain and respond to such risks when they occur. Example is Facebook acquires Instagram. External risks. These are external to the organization and are beyond its control and influence, like war, political changes, natural disasters, etc. These risks are managed through identification and mitigation actions. Impact of such risks can be managed through effective business continuity and contingency planning. Example is to alter the physical presence to reduce the impact of political change. Internal control risks. These are the risks related to governance and internal control activity as any organization with employees and managers finds that they do not always act in the best interest of the organization, maybe because of the innocent mistake, deliberate act, or negligent omission. These risks arise from the system, processes, and control an organization has in place managed by its employees and managers. As poorly designed system, processes, and control may increase the potential for innocent mistake. Weaknesses in policies, procedure, staff training can increase the risk of internal control failures where employees and managers are unclear about their roles and responsibilities. Approach to categorize risk depends upon the nature of business activity. Small organization does not require detailed typologies. Complex sector like finance require detailed risk categorizations. Role of the board in risk management. Board is ultimately responsible for overseeing the effectiveness of risk management practices within the organization, along with compliance with relevant regulations. Board is encouraged by monitoring and review of risk, including the scope and frequency of reporting and assurances. Key risks are communicated to the board by risk dashboard policies. Risk interconnectivity. With the rise in globalization, innovation, technology development, the risks are becoming complex, impactful, and interconnected.